COVID-19 is an infectious disease caused by a newly discovered coronavirus. Most people infected with the COVID-19 virus will experience mild to moderate respiratory illness and recover without requiring special treatment. Older people and those with underlying medical problems like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, chronic respiratory disease, and cancer are more likely to develop serious illnesses. In this edition of Insight, we feature one of the first responders in the fight against COVID-19. The Fire and Ambulance Service has greatly impacted Dominica's response to COVID-19, which has resulted in Dominica's no active cases status. The Dominica Fire and Ambulance Services is governed by Chapter 42, Section 60 of the Revised Laws of Dominica under the supervision of the Chief Fire Officer. The post is presently held by Mr. Josiah Dupuy. The firefighters have been and continue to remain on the front line. They are the first responders and the ones responsible for transporting COVID-19 patients to be tested and/or to be admitted to the COVID facility. The principal function of the fire service is to save not only the lives of humans, but also that of animals.
Taking preventative steps, alerting persons of practices, things that they can actually do that will prevent injury or even potential loss of life. And so we guard this particular duty with the kind of care that I think it deserves, because life is in fact precious. But apart from saving lives, we also are responsible for protecting property, particularly from the destruction of fire. Firefighters, this is one of the core functions we participate in also. So we do firefighting, and our firefighting approach is often one of trying to arrest the fire where it started, but often it also includes preventing the fire from spreading to buildings that may be, or property that may be affected if the fire was allowed to just burn unabated. So we are of course responsible for protecting property from destruction of fire. Additionally, we provide an ambulance service to the citizenry and visitors who are on Dominica. So we respond to ambulance calls that would be of an emergency nature. We also respond to calls from the hospital or health facilities to transport persons back to their homes. There are jurisdictions where the ambulance is used, strictly speaking, for emergency purposes. It is an emergency service, but with our current mandate, we do exceptions to responding to calls that are not necessarily deemed of an emergency. But essentially, our primary purpose is for emergency response. Calls from accident sites, from homes, from places of work, where people have an individual may have an emergency that we respond to.
The fire department has transitioned with the use of innovation and creativity over the years. Their quick response to emergencies have allowed them to better adapt to this pandemic.
Your regular passenger bus into ambulances, and you may well have footage of that already. Members of the public, I'm pretty certain, would have seen highlights of the ambulances or the buses that were converted into ambulances. Excellent work. It really cannot be overstated. And I really want to express my gratitude for the kind of work that my maintenance staff has been putting out over the years, as a matter of fact. I think it's quite remarkable that over decades, those who are here and those who have retired have really done a fantastic job in keeping our fleet serviceable. Fire vehicles, whether it's the ambulance or the fire engines, they work for extended periods of time based on the emergency at hand. In the case of the ambulance, it works 24/7, 365 days. So it's quite a feat to keep those vehicles serviceable for periods, the case of our ambulances, that easily extend past 6-7 years. We have our fire prevention unit. The fire prevention unit, in fact, for most fire organizations, is referred to as the flagship of that organization, because fire prevention objective is really to minimize the likelihood of fires. It is meant to ensure that systems are in place, that persons are trained, that there is a regime of safety practiced at schools, at churches, at private, public sector organization, that reduces, one, the likelihood of fire or any other emergency, and also puts in place provisions that would minimize damage, loss of life even, loss of property, that would allow owners, shareholders, whatever the case may be, to get back into normal operation. Even when there is an incident, even when there is a disaster, it allows them to get back into operation a lot quicker than they normally would in the absence of what our fire prevention unit has been doing.
Chief Fire Officer Mr. Josiah Dupe uses the opportunity during this pandemic to evaluate the protocols within the department.
Since we've come up with the challenge, or have had to deal rather, with the challenge of the COVID-19, it has really given us cause to look seriously at how we respond to ambulance calls, how we respond to just regular traffic accidents. And it gives us a greater appreciation of how much we must protect ourselves too, because it's by protecting ourselves that we can in turn limit spread among ourselves and therefore reduce the chances of affecting the available staff for continuity of service. If we are not protective of ourselves, it means too that we become much more vulnerable to being affected by, say, COVID-19, and in turn affecting or infecting other persons. So yes, our safety protocols, we have had to review it. It also speaks to the whole issue of training, how important it is for us to continue with our internal training, because initially, for example, we had just 6 persons trained from the national training that was done by the Ministry of Health and PAHO. And we don't offer 6 as a number that was insufficient, because by our normal practice, once we receive training, we come back to our station house and pass that training on.
The Deputy Chief Fire Officer position is currently held by Mr. Wayne Later. The response to COVID-19 was developed long before the first case was introduced in Dominica on the 22nd of March.
What the fire and ambulance services did was to do advanced preparation. Seeing that we are an organization which responds to hazardous materials, we had a sense of some of the protocols that we had to put in place even before COVID-19 arrives. So some of the things includes receiving calls, how we look at those calls and we screen those calls. So we put protocols in place, and our second issue of such protocol was, and that's an updated version, was on the 17th of March. The first was issued on the 2nd of March 2020, and then the updated version was on the 17th of March, and that was before COVID actually arrived in Dominica. Part of that protocol would include how the calls that we receive, make sure that we ask the persons various questions to find out where they were, their symptoms, and so on. And we actually had this protocol in place, which included notifying the hospital of any such calls and the use of PPEs. We also went on to develop specific protocols for cleaning of our ambulances. So we call that the decontamination of our ambulances during any COVID call, and that involves strict hygiene protocol, which would involve disinfecting and sanitizing of those ambulances at all times. We also went ahead to create what we commonly call here in the fire service as the decontamination bay. And all this was put in place so that we could have smooth operation during response to COVID-19. We also had in place in all stations, and this was according to the protocols that we had in terms of hygiene, hand washing. We did all that and have it so every station would be following the same protocol as to how to wash your hand, where we would have additional standpipes, additional face basins erected. So we did those things in advance of the COVID-19. And to approach all this, the fire and ambulance services, we follow what we call an incident command system. So in preparing for the COVID-19, we implemented a system, we'll call it the event command system. And it's basically moduling the system on the incident command system. And that's what we had in place was various officers would have specific responsibilities. So whereas coming in directly into COVID-19, all calls would come to the chief or the deputy fire officer, and then we would pass on this information. But within the incident or event command system, what you find, each officer had a specific. So we had a communication officer. So that officer would have received the information and then pass it on to the various other sectors. Then we had the operations commanding officer, and that officer would be responsible for organizing all our response to any COVID scene. We also had the personnel coordinator. That person would be responsible for taking care of the persons, of all our personnel. And one of the things we could look at is that of hygiene, haircut, shaving. So we would have organized for barber to be in each station to do that, feeding of everybody, and the well-being of all officers. So one person was specifically responsible for that.
Over the years, the tireless but inconspicuous efforts of the fire department has kept Dominicans safe. However, this pandemic has granted the fire and ambulance services the opportunity to receive recognition as they are better able to relate to the public.
Given us an opportunity, I think, to engage with the wider public in a way that we have not quite done before. We certainly have received quite a bit of recognition, and we certainly appreciate that. I quickly say that by virtue of the duties that I spoke of a little earlier, we do what we do not for the praise or accolade. We do it because it's our duty to do. But COVID-19 has given us an opportunity to have that kind of engagement and to hear from people, to get feedback from them that allows us to make improvements where we think it is required, that allows us to get a sense, a good measure of what it is that we're doing and how does the general public receive the type of service that we, so it's really an opportunity for us to also do a sort of evaluation, not just to hear the good, but in instances where there are genuine complaints, for us to actually look at those complaints with a view to reviewing it to improve on the service that we deliver.
This is the most commendation, and let us say from all walks of life, be it the government. I know some of the elderly people would have given you all their blessings when you assisted them one way or the other. But the commendations that we got from the general public, the government, everybody, it is overwhelming. And it is my hope that those commendations would not stop after COVID-19. Because honestly, we are doing a job that deserves beyond even those commendations. And I can say it at the point where I stand. After 29 years of service, I know what is involved. I know the risk that is involved. Would you imagine if the fire service had decided, boy, we maintain what they call a hands-down approach on COVID-19, what our situation would have been in Dominica? And I think that's one of the first things that we began to speak to our officers about. Because if we say we are not going to do this, we are not going to do that, we are not just affecting some persons, but all of us, our families, even ourselves will be affected. So, having said that, is kudos to us, and I want to again even thank the general public for all the commendation, all their blessings, all their guidance. Up to today, you go and you pass on the road and they tell you, be safe, be safe, be safe, be safe, be safe. And I think it is good for us. It is good for us. It is good, very good recognition. Even the business places, some of them put things in place to ensure that when we come, that we don't have to follow a line. As long as they find out that we are fire officers, yeah, give us somewhat, trust me, it is good. It is good. It is good.
The recruitment of 28 people aided in the response during bushfire season. Decentralized on-the-job training is currently preparing these recruits for more adverse conditions.
We have that activity taking place at the Portsmouth Fire Station, at Melville Hall Fire Station, at the Granby Fire Station, and here at Fire Brigade Headquarters. The intention is to do this training program in a manner that would allow those new entrants to impact on the organization in terms of being able to be deployed on a full-time basis as quickly as possible. Currently, although they are doing on-the-job training, quite a bit of that training involves a lot of the practical work. So just about every one of those trainees have already responded to multiple bushfires. This is, in fact, the bushfire season, and it is a good opportunity to give them and also to observe them to see how they fare out in the adverse conditions, whether we are talking about bushfires, a simple bushfire, or a larger bushfire. And some of the other activities that we are engaged in at present, we select and get them involved too. So, as I said, this format is not the norm, but it is one, especially given the times and the emergency that we found ourselves in, especially with the advent of COVID-19. We actually decided to have them participate in not a regular, normal recruit training program, but this on-the-job training program. I must say that we here at the Fire Service are extremely delighted for the opportunity for this intake. Our plans, short to medium term, does include at least proposing to have a significant increase in our establishment with the objectives of being able to have a better work or shift regime in place. And I think that this intake of 28 is a step in the right direction.
Firefighting has historically been a predominantly male profession throughout the world. However, one of the female recruits of the fire and ambulance services in Dominica, Mariah Jeremy, believes that women can take up any profession that they wish to pursue.
Being a young woman in the fire service department, I think you can give it a try as a young woman. It's not a bad thing as you see it on the outside.
We can use the fire and ambulance services as proof that the gender lines are blurring in many occupations, as we see more female firefighters being recruited and assuming senior positions in the service. Courtney Joseph, a senior firefighter, has assisted with the recruitment of the new fire officers. She is passionate about her career and believes that women can contribute greatly to this heroic field.
All officers here have a major part to play with the recruits because we actually expose them to different things that they were not accustomed to, and we help guide them to ensure that they do the work efficiently to safeguard themselves as well as the other members on crew.
Station Officer Michael Warrington is dedicated to serving his country and ensuring the safety of citizens. Officer Warrington calls on the public to show respect to the officers and their contribution, not only to the fight against COVID-19, but for the continued fight to keep them protected. He is responsible for ensuring that all operations are completed. Station Officer Warrington believes that the fire department is doing an excellent job and is under its best operations with the leadership of Chief Officer Josiah Dupe and Deputy Chief Wayne Litton.
I really want to commend the Chief Fire Officer and his deputy for their leadership. Their leadership, had it not been, I tell you, would be nowhere, but their leadership has really, I've seen the chief in action from, I remember T.S. Erica, I remember Hurricane Maria, and I will tell you, for COVID-19, the Chief Fire Officer has really stood up. And I want to say kudos from where I stand, he and his deputy, or newest deputy later, I want to tell them kudos, and I'm happy to be part of that organization. They make me feel proud myself.
Officer Warrington believes that being prepared helps minimize the challenges they have faced as a team.
One of the things that probably help us with our challenges is that our motto is Semper Paratus. We are always prepared. And because we are always prepared, we might not be fully prepared with all the resources that we have, but what we have, we get it to work for us. And I speak of one of the first things that we start doing is put protocols in place that would, of course, help us prevent us from being exposed and prevent us from being infected. So we try to make sure that we ourselves, that in all of our preparation, that we are not exposed, and we also we are not infected. Besides that, one of the things that we also do, even in our own protocols, maintain good hygiene, just like any other business place would have done. And under the direction of the Chief Officer and his deputy again, one of the things that we did, our protocols, we established that protocols with all other station officers. Yeah, we came to meeting, we discussed it, we looked at it, and then we pass it on to all our stations. So in a nutshell, that in itself will to better prepare us as far as our response to COVID-19.
The fight against COVID-19 has altered the lives and daily routines of many, particularly the frontline workers. The Dominican firefighters explained how COVID-19 has affected their lives and that of their families. Some described this drastic change as fearful, while others were uncertain of their next step.
Whenever we have situations like COVID-19, although the regulation does say that it is a job of continuous availability, in times like this, these letters truly mean what they say. So myself and my deputy, my station officers, senior officers, have essentially just been at it. Admittedly, in the last 2 weeks, a little more than that, we have not had as much activities, but it has really put us right in the center of things for several weeks on end. I speak for myself. I think I do well under pressure. I've endured situations not quite like COVID, but and how has it affected me and my family? There is a situation of travel from where I live to where I work.
I am diabetic, so information from the doctor from early on was persons with those underlying illnesses should not be in the fight. But this is the fire service. We at the fire department find ways of minimizing the threat and working around it. So it posed a little stress at the beginning. But quickly with my family, we came up with a plan, and that plan was met, we acted on it. So at home, I installed a table, and we got alcohol, 70% alcohol, hand sanitizer, that would be there. So that was the plan. If we have COVID in Dominica, anybody who goes out of the house when he comes back in, you sanitize before going in, and once you reach in, you go straight to the bathroom, you remove your clothes on the veranda. We had a basket in place, put your clothes in the basket, go to the washroom. After you sanitize your hand, go to the washroom, you bathe, put on clothes, then you come and do what you do. So that was our plan for home. As per my family, it was a bit worrisome because having my wife at work, my daughter at school, so things started coming on. We have my wife's sister is living with us. She's a bit challenged, but she works with the NEP, so going out to work. So that was a sort of challenge initially, so we put a plan in place. So once they said school's out, one problem solved. Then curfew and business places closed because of my wife's work. She had to be at work, but she could work from home. So I had a little less stress. And that eased up my pressure. At work, it was simple. You come, you sanitize, because we knew that you could get COVID into your system by touching and then putting your hands into your mouth. So for persons like me who is accustomed of washing and using alcohol-based sanitizers and cleaning, in the fire service, that's what we do. We disinfect. So it was a bit easy moving into that.
What you find is every day you come to work, you expect, man, there might be some report. Probably one of the officers might get an exposure because they on the front line, I mean, every day, especially in the earlier part of we having our first case. So for me is probably you're at home, they need to call you. In fact, one of the things that we did, even under the direction of the chief and his deputy, we put what we call a command system in place, ICS command system. So what you find is, for me, example, I'm in charge of personnel. So if somebody had to be transported to the COVID center, whether it's for quarantine or whether it's in the isolated areas, I'll get that information, and I would have to identify the person to take them to the centers. So in doing so, one of the things and for me, it was good because I never had one day where when I called to get somebody to transport whoever the person was to the COVID center, that I would have had some resistance. I never had that. So for me, it was like, oh man, nice work, Fruit, nice work. But it's like human being, all of us, we had our own fears, almost in a state of panic sometimes. But I think through it all, I think we handled it quite well.
Misha Ofa, a fire officer, described his experience as tough. Officer Ofa stated that he is now on comfortable grounds to deal with the new normal.
It has had a great impact, I must say, because normally you would be happy to leave work to go home to get a rest, meet your family. But since COVID, you're mentally not stable. You always think of what if you have contracted and then you might be transporting it to your home. You're always fearful that you transport it or bring it to your family and so on.
The Dominica Fire and Ambulance Services continue to set an example that exemplary leadership and teamwork is key to keeping themselves and citizens safe during this pandemic. Their hard work and dedication continues to play a huge part in Dominica's fight against COVID-19 and its recovery. Alia Martin for Government Information Service.